Hello, hello, and welcome to A Lonely Critic. My name is Anthony Renteria, and today is the second part of our Alfred Hitchcock film club. So today I just got done watching The Lodger, A Story of the London Fog, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. And then it was written by Elliot Stannard, based on the novel by Marie Belloc-Lundis. And then the music is by Ashley Irwin, which I believe is a recomposition that was made in 1999. The cinematography is by Gaetano de Ventimiglia. So those are some of the credits. Before I start the review, and I have a new structure. Hopefully from now on my reviews will be a little more succinct and organized, because I'm gonna hit these beats real quick. So for anyone who isn't participating in the film club and maybe you just saw this review pop up on my feed, what is The Lodger, A Story of the London Fog? So this is Hitchcock's second film that is widely available. It was directed by him in 1927. This is about 2 years after the previous film I watched, which was The Pleasure Garden. And the story here, and this is still a silent film, the same like color tinting and all that going on, but the general gist of the film is that there is a murderer, I assume in London. It seems like it's kind of inspired by Jack the Ripper, and is lodging in this new hotel, and then it's the suspense of who is a serial killer who's killing women with fair hair. And there's obviously like a woman involved in the story who is also living in this like hotel. Yeah, so that's basically the general gist. I don't want to spoil too much here in the beginning, but I mean, it is a basic, simple mystery kind of thriller plot. I think it's very interesting and telling that Hitchcock himself, I think he told Francis Truffaut in a discussion with him that he considers this his first real film. Even though he had made thrillers and suspenseful films before, he considers this almost like his origin, and it really does feel like that. To get into the actual review and discussion of this film, we're going to begin with the narrative and the performances. The narrative and the plot line, I think, is probably the thing that kind of made the film kind of weaker for me than... It's weird, because, so just going back and comparing this to The Pleasure Garden, I think I had a better experience watching The Pleasure Garden. I think it was a more fulfilling film, emotionally and then attentively, but I think it's just an issue of the silent form being kind of constricted. This film has a lot more, I wouldn't say it had more dialogue, but it had more potential for dialogue, and it was a deeper, more complicated script or story, I feel like, because, you know, it's dealing with suspense, and it's dealing with suspense and drama and the idea of who is the serial killer, the mystery of who the serial killer is. And I found that the film, at least for me in my personal experience, I found like the film kind of struggled to really plant that in an emotional way to where I could connect with it. Where in The Pleasure Garden, I felt way more connected emotionally to the characters very rapidly, and I cared about them, and then I also understood the narrative of what was going on, but it was very simple in The Pleasure Garden. And here in The Lodger, it seems like, I don't know if it's just a limitation of the form, or just Hitchcock maybe biting off more than he can chew, or if something was messed up during the screenwriting and maybe some title cards were removed. I was looking at the IMDb just for some trivia, and apparently there was an instance of a producer removing a bunch of title cards because they found it to be overly long or something. So yeah, the movie was trimmed by a critic, and this is just based on IMDb, so this could be incorrect. Don't take this as fact, but just as a interesting aside. Yeah, so this film critic who re-edited the film, cut the title cards from 400 to 80. That's an insane amount. I don't know if that's true, but it did feel like the narrative was a little more than it should have been. Well, not more. The narrative was more complex than I think the form is meant. Just from what I've seen of silent films, I feel like it seems like it is insanely difficult to portray a very complex narrative with a silent film. And maybe the only way to do that would have been to have more cards, and maybe that would have helped me connect more, and maybe this person who the studio or producer got to edit it down and cut moments out, maybe that's what was missing for me to connect with the piece. But it is definitely a loss, and I think it's definitely a negative that I feel coming from The Pleasure Garden to this. I think narratively it's down a peg, and I wasn't connecting as much. So we'll get on to the performances. The performances I thought were spectacular. Again, like, it is so insane to see silent film performances compared to sound performances that I'm used to. And it's interesting seeing how these performers are using the medium in a certain way. And it's fascinating to see for me for the first time. Obviously, the standout is Ivor Novello as the Lodger, and he gives pretty spectacular performance. Just the way all the characters, like, it's obviously over the top and it's very expression full, but it is very interesting to see, and the way Hitchcock captures them, just beautiful. So that's going to lead me to the visuals. And this is where the film is a revelation, I think, is in the visuals. So he has the same cinematographer from The Pleasure Garden. Fact check this. Yeah, Gaetano di Ventimiglia. And please someone tell me, or actually I could probably look up how to pronounce it. I'm sorry I'm pronouncing it wrong probably, but let's just call him GDT, Guillermo del Toro. Hitchcock and his cinematographer are insane. I mean, the progression and the amount of evolution from Pleasure Garden to The Lodger is absolutely breathtaking. I mean, there is so many sequences in The Lodger that just blew my mind. There's a moment where The Lodger is just pacing upstairs and we are downstairs with the camera, and the camera kind of like shows a shot up to the ceiling, and then there's chandeliers or some light fixture that's like swaying back and forth, and then suddenly, amazing to me, like I was in shock when this happened, but it's almost like the ceiling turned into glass and we could see up. I don't know how he captured that, if it was just like a different shot and then he just layered on top. That's probably what he did, but it's interesting to me, like, how do you even capture that angle and that height? Like, I guess it would just be glass and then you're just stamping that over it, but still, it is fascinating use of cinematography and visuals and editing all in once to display such an amazing idea and to get it so succinct and perfect, honestly. And then he does it again multiple times. There's another scene where a police, actually I don't remember what exactly he was, but let's just say a police officer or a detective of some sort. He's looking at a footprint, and then within the footprint, he's like replaying the evidence and the facts and the information that he has to catch this Lodger serial killer. And again, it was just beautifully done. It is so, it's like so simple, but then it's also complex when you think about it because of its simplicity and its complexity, and then the way it just uses the medium of film. It's like, it's spectacular to me, and it's something that I'm not really used to seeing. And then it's just crazy that this is in 1927, they're working at this level. Like, seeing even one of those scenes at a modern day film would have my jaw on the floor, and I'd be like, oh my god, this is a revelation. So it's amazing to see Hitchcock, I guess, visually begin to flourish with the cinematographer on their second film, or not their second film, but their second available film that's widely available to the public. And just seeing the amount of growth from Pleasure Garden to The Lodger, I don't even know what to expect from here on out. Like, I mean, the jump, like if I had to just give a rating to the cinematography in The Pleasure Garden, I would have gave it maybe a 6 out of 10. The cinematography in The Lodger is, I mean, we're at 9, and I mean, I could give this a 10 out of 10 visually. Like, the beauty in the cinematography, the shots, the shot designs, the staging, and then just to add in with that the editing, the way everything is composed is like, absolutely. As a fan of visuals and photography and painting, and like, it just captures such an artistic vibe, and it's so cool. Like, it feels mysterious and noir and suspenseful, and like, I can feel the dread on the screen. That does bring me to one thing that I guess is my complaint. So like, it's so weird with this film because I feel like this is just on a technical level, just in a technical aspect, it is working on such a higher caliber than The Pleasure Garden was. Maybe it's because he had a bigger budget, or maybe it's just his experience level increased, or he had more vocal power to exercise his actual vision, because it does seem like even this one was still hampered by, that critic who edited the title card. So I'm imagining up to this point he's still a filmmaker with some sort of shackles. And I imagine at some point Hitchcock maybe becomes freed from those shackles and becomes the auteur that he becomes. So that is super interesting, just to see within his limitations what he's able to manufacture. But the thing that is difficult to explain is that I guess I forgot to say this up front, but I started watching this yesterday after work, and I was just really tired. I had like a really bad day the day before, and I kept passing out. Like I was watching the movie and I just kept passing out. Like I was just falling asleep. And I mean, I was very tired, granted, because I barely got any sleep the previous day. So it's not the film's fault. I fell asleep multiple times and I was like, all right, I can't. I'm not watching the movie. I need to stop, just go to bed, and try again today. So I tried again today, and I did, and I got through it. But I will say, this film is very, very long. I mean, it dragged for me. And I think it's because it's an hour and 30 minutes, an hour and 32 minutes, and it was just... I don't know. It was just way, and it's interesting because I was thinking the Pleasure Garden was way shorter. Now I'm looking at the runtime for the Pleasure Garden, and it's only an hour 15. So it's only a 15-minute difference. But for some reason, The Lodger just dragged for me, dragged severely. Even today when I rewatched it again, I mean, I felt myself very distracted and bored. And again, I do have a lot of stuff going on in my life right now, and I am still very exhausted and tired. I haven't been sleeping well. So it could be a personal thing, but just from my experience, attention wise, I was losing track of what was going on. I mean, not what was going on, but the amount of interest and emotional attachment that I had was very bad. I mean, it's probably it was a tough watch, is what I'm trying to say. And which is, it's so weird because, you know, I love the cinematography, I love the editing, I love the costumes, I love the makeup, I love the performances. For some reason, it was just a really hard watch. I mean, this is the experience I had watching this, like an emotional, connective, and attention interest level was what I was expecting from Pleasure Garden. Like, this is kind of what I expected the feeling to be from a silent film, which is almost like a kind of chuggy experience because you're not getting all the information that you would get from a normal, you know, sound film. But for some reason, the Pleasure Garden, I just immediately connected. I think it was just more, it was better edited speed-wise. And I think for The Lodger, I don't know if it's maybe the title card thing that made it drag, like it was dragging, or just the editing of the entire piece. But it was a tough watch, and I think that is my major complaint of the film was that. And I don't know what to attribute it to exactly. Like I'm saying, maybe it's the script, maybe it's the editing. I just know really slowed me down, and it was a tough watch. So as much as I love the visuals and the editing and the cinematography and the performances, the narrative and the structure of the entire piece, it was a tough watch. So that brings me to the sound and score, and I have something I'm really curious, and I really need y'all to answer this for me because I'm very confused right now. So in this film, if you've seen it, this Criterion, I think it's a Criterion release. It was re-restored by the British Film Institute. So shout out and props to them for doing that. That's amazing. I love when people and organizations and communities restore art, specifically films. And right now I'm like very headstrong on video game preservation. So onto the sound. There's one thing I wanted to ask y'all and see if anyone has the answer, is that there's 3 parts in this film where it like goes into a song, like a modern day song with a female singer, and I was insanely confused. I mean, like I was watching the movie and then it started and it just, you know, it's like a piano and it's like, beauty down, I miss you. Like, it is weird. And I was like, oh, this is not right. My Spotify must be playing. You know, checked my computer, checked all my tabs. There was no Spotify. And I was like, what the hell? You know, I fast forwarded in the movie, still doing it. I rewinded in the movie, still doing it. I skipped ahead, it was still doing it. I closed the browser, opened it back up. Like, I was confused. I thought this was not a part of the movie. There's no way. But I guess it is. And I guess it is because it plays 2 more times. Like, well, it's 2 different songs, but it happens 3 times in the movie where this like modern kind of song with a modern sounding singer is singing, and it totally ruined those 3 scenes for me. I don't know if that was added in the 1999 restoration by the British Film Institute. Maybe the original sounds from those 3 moments were lost or something, or I don't know. So if anyone has the answers to that, because I can't find any, or if the film is playing that for you, let me know. Because if it's just playing it for me, then what the hell? Because I rented it off Amazon, so yeah, I don't know. So if anyone can answer that. Again, the score, I think that could also be an element of why the movie kind of felt like it was dragging for me. Was I think the score in The Lodger is a step down from The Pleasure Garden comparatively, because the score in the Lodger, like, it was good at first, but it was consistently following the same routines and the same patterns, which, I mean, The Pleasure Garden probably did as well. But for some reason, when it's that suspenseful kind of score where it's like hitting the same suspenseful beats, it really drained on me. So I think the score wasn't as good as I hoped, and it didn't really push me through the film as much as I think The Pleasure Garden did. And then those three pieces that I'm talking about just eviscerated any focus I had on the movie. Like, it just pulled me straight up. I mean, it pulled me so out of the film that I restarted my browser. I tried looking up other things to see if that was authentic or not. So yeah, so that'll wrap up the sound, because my cats are starting to meow, so I need to wrap this up. So final thoughts and then the score. So my final thoughts on this film is that it is a visual masterpiece. I mean, it is only the beginning of Hitchcock. This is considered what he considers his first film, and it definitely feels like that, just on a visual, technical level. And I love that. I mean, there's certain frames and sequences in this film that I think are stellar. And like the way he uses editing again to do the crossfades in an image is something that I've never really seen that much in the films that I've seen. So seeing him already just be a master of that is amazing. I love the close-ups as well, the way he frames people in close-ups and how he captures that emotionality. And there's like almost something where like people's eyes are just always shining when he punches in super close, and it's almost like glimmering. And I don't know if that's just the kind of lights or if he's doing something or manipulating the image, but beautiful work. So just visually, I'm finally starting to see little notes of who he is as an artist, and that's very exciting. But because of the film being so slow and just kind of draining on me, and a tough watch and kind of exhaustive, I think my score is gonna be... See, it's so hard because it's like the visuals are at a 10. The narrative and the pacing is like at a 2, where The Pleasure Garden was just like a 6, just all the way down. So I think I'm going to give it a 6. I don't think I could give this a worse rating than The Pleasure Garden, just because of how elaborate and complex and beautiful the visuals are, and how it feels kind of ambitious trying to tell such a large, mystery suspense narrative. Well, not large, but for me large, thinking about what you can do in silent film. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I think that is high as I can go with the score, because of the complaints that I've talked about with the pacing and stuff. So I think The Pleasure Garden is still a more watchable film. I would rewatch The Pleasure Garden, where I don't know if I would rewatch the whole piece of this. I would rewatch scenes though. Thank you for watching my immediate impressions of The Lodger by Alfred Hitchcock for our Alfred Hitchcock Film Club. Next on the roster docket is Downhill, which was filmed in 1927 as well, or released in 1927 as well. So we will get into that next week. So I'm really excited to continue down this path. I'm really excited to move out of silent films, because this one was kind of a little sour for me, but I'm really excited to see him delve into sound and see a narrative, because I have come to realize that I'm a very emotional viewer. So like, I need a film to affect me in an emotional way for me to enjoy it. So I'm curious if his work will connect with me in that way. Like, are his films emotional, or are they just suspense? And I find suspense is great and awesome and technically impressive, but wondering if there's going to be a lack of or an emotional disconnect with his work for me. So yeah, that's going to conclude this discussion. If you like my talk, give me a like and subscribe. Leave a comment on the question that I had about the 3 song pieces, and let me know your thoughts on this film and if you liked it or didn't like it. Thank y'all so much. I apologize. I am very exhausted and tired, and then I am in a room with cats, so if you heard any meowing, that is them, and I apologize. I will see you next week with Downhill.